Hi everyone. Welcome to the Leadership in Action series, where we delve into the leadership journeys of leaders from different fields. Today, we have an extraordinary leader with us, the 28th Army Chief of the Indian Army, General Manoj Mukund Naravane. Welcome, sir.
Thank you.
It is my honor to meet you, and I am deeply grateful to you for doing this interview in person. Viewers, we will start with the defense and strategic questions, followed by leadership, and then a few touching upon his personal life. So, it is proverbially said that you can choose your friends but not your neighbors. Given India's history of a deep civilizational conflict with Pakistan on one hand and a belligerent communist regime on the other, in addition to their cooperation in containing India's influence, a two front war seems like a likely possibility in the future. Having been, having been at the helm of the Indian Army, what are your views on India's readiness levels to deal with a two front war in terms of economic and military capabilities?
Well, firstly, thank you, Anaga, for having me on this program of yours. And it is always a pleasure to be able to talk and send the message across to the larger population on aspects of military and the security. It's a subject which many people are quite unaware of, and it is a good thing that such programs are being done to raise the overall level of awareness in the country about security issues. Coming on to the particular question that you have asked, we have, of course, two belligerent neighbors to our west and northeast in Pakistan and China. So, definitely, there are multiple threats that we face on account of this. But what is important is to be able to distinguish between a two front or multiple front threats and fighting two front wars. And this is a point I make quite often because these terms are used very interchangeably without understanding the ramifications. So, obviously, when you have multiple threats, or to keep it simple, two front threat, one with on the west with Pakistan, one to the north with China, the capabilities that require to be developed to cater and deal with these two threats would be different. And to that end, we are always in the process of analyzing what these threats could be, how would they manifest, and what all needs to be done to be able to deal with them.
Right.
But fighting a two front war as against preparing for a two front threat is a different ball game altogether. And fighting on two fronts is never a good idea. And history is replete with examples where when countries tried to fight on two fronts, they were had to suffer defeat. And the most obvious and glaring example of that is Germany in World War II. They opened a front to their west in France and against England. But then halfway through that, before they could completely subdue that threat, they opened the front to their east against Russia. So they on their own started fighting on two fronts. And when that happened, against the combined might of two enemies, then one person will always suffer. And I give this example of a boxer in a ring. If there is one boxer in a boxing ring against two opponents, then you can well imagine what the result is going to be, no matter how strong that single person is. So, therefore, while we will cater to deal with multiple threats, our endeavor should always be to tackle one front at one time. And that would be done through a variety of means, which I will expound upon later.
Right. So, as you said, it's never a good idea to go with a two-front war at any time.
Yeah. That's the bottom line.
Yes. The Russian offensive in Ukraine has shattered a very common belief in military fraternity that wars of the future will be short lived, decisive, and intense. In fact, the conflict has dragged on for more than 2 years now, and there are no signs of a ceasefire. On the contrary, the resilience of Russia's military and economic capabilities against the combined might of the West has surprised many. So, on this backdrop, what kind of lessons in terms of new age warfare and technology can the Indian armed forces draw upon?
Well, the Russia-Ukraine war is now already in its third year, and it started in February of 2021. And many lessons will be learnt from the war at various levels: tactical level, operational level, strategic level. But the first and foremost lesson is that wars will always be there. And after a prolonged period of peace, there is that tendency which comes into a country, into the psyche of the people, that wars are passé, and people realize that wars lead to death and destruction, etc., etc., and therefore, why prepare for war? So the first, actually, the and foremost lesson is that wars are always around the corner, because you might want peace, but you can't tell your opponent what to do or what not to do, and therefore you have to be prepared for the worst case scenario. And that is, I think, the first and foremost lesson, that if you want peace, prepare for war. And this is a saying made in the 5th century by a Roman scholar. And I think what he said in the 5th century is still applicable today. Nothing has changed in thousands of years. Then, of course, not just from the Russian side, from the Ukrainian side also, if a big country thinks they'll win an easy victory over a small country, then the resilience of that smaller country is also something we have to consider. That it is not always a walkover. There are many factors which come into play: the moral versus the material, the morale versus only the numbers. And in this case, I think Ukraine has shown great resilience in being able to hold its own against a much bigger country and a much bigger enemy. And we can draw parallels in that between various countries in our neighborhood. Who is the bigger one, who is the smaller one, and what are the likely outcomes. But it is equally correct what, as you mentioned in your statement, that Russia also has been able to hold out against the collective might of the West. And in spite of all the aid which has been pouring into Ukraine, it has not really had the desired outcome. And getting back to the point which I made, that if you want peace, prepare for war. There is the war started in 22, not in 21, 22. There is a World Bank report of May 23, of 1 year after the war, which said that the cost of reconstruction of just the first year of the war is $411 billion.
My goodness.
Now, second year you can add that much, third year you can add that much. Even if a fraction of that had been spent on war preparedness, perhaps the war itself could have been averted. So that is the But those are some of the lessons that, and we will not go into the tactical lessons because they're all shrouded in the fog of war and so much information warfare as to what is doing well and what is not doing well. So that we will come to know only when the dust settles down.
Right. Moving on to the Gaza conflict, it highlights the complexity of combating terrorist organizations within civilian populations in a war. It prompts reflection on India's approach to dealing with such groups across policy, military, and tactical dimensions. Does this conflict offer any lessons for India in terms of dealing with terror organizations?
Well, what is happening in the Gaza Strip between Israel and the Hamas. Hamas, of course, supported by other countries, mainly Iran, and the kind of terrorism which we have in India, which is proxy war supported by Pakistan, are quite different. But the bottom line is that acts of terror and terrorism are unacceptable. Warfare also has some rules. You cannot be targeting innocent civilians, women, children, one combatant against another combatant is in the rules of warfare. But you cannot start slaughtering civilians. So to that extent, uh, as I said, this kind of terrorism and barbarism, taking women and children hostage, that is not civilized behavior, if I can put it that way. But as far as our counter-terrorism operations are concerned, we have always done it keeping in mind that it is our people in our territory who have been misled and misguided by their handlers abroad. They are our citizens, and therefore, we, as far as possible, try to deal with them in a humane manner, even when operations are carried out and the terrorists are cornered and holed up in a house. We try our best to get them to first surrender. It gives us no joy in killing young men. After all, they are somebody's brother, father, sister, not sister, sister, It gives us no joy in that. So therefore, our approach has always been a humane approach with the use of minimum force. In our counterterrorism operations, we have never used artillery, we have never used helicopter gunships, we have never used armor. So what is happening in Hamas is more like a full-fledged conventional war and not merely counter-terrorist operations. Unlike in JNK, where it is predominantly, or why predominantly, it is all just more, is all infantry operations by small teams targeted at specific uh, int-based operations, specific terrorist groups or persons who are trying to indulge in terrorist acts, with the aim that there should be least amount of disturbance or inconvenience to the local population. So there are totally different strategies at play.
So, what is your opinion with respect to the readiness of the Indian Army in drone and cyber warfare and exploiting military applications of artificial intelligence? How do we compare to the People's Liberation Army of China, and what kind of limitations we need to overcome in these areas?
Technology is going to have a more and more important role to play in future wars and how they are prosecuted. So to that end, we are it's a ever developing thing. It's not that you do something today and that's the end. So as and when technology develops, we see what are its uses, its applicability, how it will impact on the character of warfare, how will it impact on the tactics that we have to adopt on the battlefield. So this is a continuous process, and I will say that we are not in any way behind any army in the world via just the PLA. We are not behind any army in the world as far as being at the cutting edge in using all these things, whether it is artificial intelligence, machine learning, cyber warfare, drones, Internet of Things, quantum computing. You name all the technologies, we are all there. And it's a continuous process, and you can't just sit back and wait for things to develop. You also have to be proactive in seeing what is happening in the technological field and incorporate that in your strategy and tactics.
So it's great to know that India is at par with China and other countries, as you said, or other countries of the West with respect to technologies. Recently,
All IT companies are run by Indians.
yes, that is true.
Why should we be behind in IT?
Yeah. Recently, India dispatched the first batch of BrahMos missiles to the Philippines, which has brought us one step closer to realizing our aspiration of becoming an arms exporter. How soon is India likely to reach a stage where we can manufacture fifth generation fighter planes, tanks, submarines, advanced missile defense systems like S-400?
So there are two parts, of course, to this question. One is how self-reliant are we? Where do we stand today as compared to yesteryears? And then going forward, what are our plans? So definitely we are much better off today than what we were a decade ago. We had in the past not kept our civil industry in the loop as far as defense manufacturing is concerned, especially in the realm of weapons. They were, like Tata's was there, they were giving us vehicles. But as I said, that's a non lethal part of it. But they were not actually manufacturing weapons, ammunition. All that was the monopoly of the defense public sector undertaking, DPSUs. Because of opening up the field to private players, it has not only brought in competition, it has spurred innovation, invention, it has speeded up uh, the developmental process. And because of all these things, obviously, we are much closer to our goal of becoming as self sufficient as possible in the field of arms, ammunition, weapons, technology. But how soon we will reach a stage where we are 100% self reliant is difficult to say. Also, one must realize that no country makes 100% of it, of any weapon system by itself. Even if the US is making something, maybe 10% of the components are coming from Germany, 10% are coming from UK. So they are also not 100% made in US, or is not 100% made in Russia. If you're getting something from Russia, maybe they're also getting components from some third country. So similarly, as and when we start making our own equipment, it may be that some portion of that is still coming from abroad. So it will be made in India and make in India, but will have some portion of foreign content, if I can put it that way. But yes, it will be indigenously designed and developed, and that would be our strength. So coming to the second part, you can only export something which is yours. You can't buy a gun from somebody else and then sell it to a third person. So, if you want to achieve an aim of being able to export weapon system, then the precursor to that is to develop your own. And that is where the BrahMos comes in, which is a joint venture between Russia and India. Again, it is not fully Indian. It is a joint venture. And because this joint venture is a corporation based in India, we are able to export it. Similarly, the light combat aircraft, we are in negotiations with a number of countries to export. So you'll only be something which is yours. And therefore, this thrust on the Make in India goes concurrently with our desire to become an exporter of weapons and systems.
Right. What do you think are India's four pillars to become a developed country by 2047?
I think not just for India, but for any country, the DIME paradigm, DIME, that is diplomacy, information, military, and economy. These are the four pillars. And if each of these pillars is strong, then a country will develop. And I think we are on the right path. Our diplomatic endeavors have proven results, world over. We are looked upon as a very reliable partner. In the information sphere also, we are not lagging behind. I'll skip M for the time being. I'll go to economy. We are now the fifth largest economy in the world, likely to become fourth and third in 2 years and 3 years from now. So economy is also on a very strong footing. And once all these are in place, automatically it will have its impact on the military. If you have a strong economy, then your military will also be strong. So if these four pillars are in place, then there is no doubt that we will also uh, expand in leaps and bounds and become stronger and stronger. In fact, to go from a 1 trillion to a 2 trillion economy took us about 14 years. From 2 trillion to 3 trillion, only 7 years. 3 trillion to 4 trillion, where we are now, it was only 4 years. So the way we are progressing, it is almost halving the time. So from 4 to 5, which is the next step, will only take about 2.5 years. And at 5 trillion, will be possibly be the third or fourth largest economy in the world. So that is, and bottom line is, power comes from a strong economy.
Electoral politics apart, what are your views on the Agnipath scheme in its current format as it stands today? Do you feel that this scheme has adversely affected the numbers and quality of recruits in the forces or hampered the morale, battle readiness, and regimentation spirit? Regimental spirit.
Before I come to the scheme as such, I would like to say that HR policies of various companies, firms, government, army, HR policies always change. So if a change is being made, you cannot deny the change. Whether that change is good or bad is a separate issue. But to say not to change it at all is self-defeating, because I think we all agree that this change is the order of the day. And if we don't change, we would have still been living in caves.
Yes.
So we have to change. Now, when people talk about the Agnipath scheme, what most people do not realize is that till the mid 70s, the color service, that is the amount of time a person spends in service for a Jawan, was only 7 years, and it was non pensionable. So people with 7 years service won the 71 hour for you. There was nothing wrong with them. And there was no pension. And the pay that time was 90 rupees. So you had various combinations were there. There was a 5+2. There was 5 years color service, that is actual enrollment, and 2 years reserve service, that you could be recalled till 2 years after you have gone out, should the necessity arise. And when that was in vogue, then your pay was 90 rupees and your reserve service pay was 45 rupees. That was in the 70s. Then it became, instead of saying 5+2, why do this complicated process? They said let it be 7 only. Then they realize that 7 years means um, if a person has joined at 16 or 17, he's 7 years, he's leaving at 22, 23. He is still young. And so therefore the government said, okay, let us increase it from 7 to 15 years and make it pensionable. Now that was also a big change. Now we are going back to somewhat in that direction. Instead of 7, it has become 4, but with a provision of retaining a certain percentage permanently. Now, when people, you know, sometimes the responses are more emotional. And oh, how will we do with 4 years service? But everyone is not going to be 4 years and below. The fourth year person will also go to the fifth year and the sixth year and the seventh year and gain an experience. Only a proportion will be below 4 years. But that doesn't mean that entire army is going to be below 4 years. And this rate of change is also going to be gradual. It is not that overnight everybody is going to be are going to be Agniveers. As the intake happen, the changes will keep happening, and for this whole change to get effected is going to take a decade plus. And in that decade plus, if certain anomalies come to light, if it felt that some changes are required, then those changes will be made. In fact, our Honorable Raksha Mantri, in an interview which he gave quite recently, had said that अगर ज़रूरत पड़े तो इसमें बदलाव भी कर सकते हैं. So nothing is written in stone. It is a policy which is made, and when a policy is made, you can never think of all the permutations and combinations, pluses, minuses. So if a policy is made and you find something is not working, it will get changed. So what is the big deal? But give it a chance to work rather than saying it is not workable right at the beginning. How do you know it is not workable? And I'm not sure what the reactions were 30, 40, 50 years ago when it was changed from 7 years to 15 years. But I'm sure that time also people would have complained that what is this silly thing that government is doing and why have they changed it? It will become result in an old army and a older age profile of the army people, etc., etc. So there is nothing wrong in making a change. In fact, I wrote an article in the Hindu in 2022 November, October end or November, highlighting all these issues. And one point which I had made in that article is that the maximum number of gallantry award winners have been younger profile, not the older profile. So that means your risk-taking ability, your physical fitness, all of that which combines and becomes a battle-winning factor is in the younger age group. So as I said, let's give it a chance. I'm not batting for it or against it. I'm saying give it a chance, and if there's a requirement of change, changes will be brought in.
So it's a work in progress. And
Yeah, it's a work in progress, absolutely.
as per media reports, the inter-service observations and impediments towards theaterization of the armed forces of India have been ironed out, and now all the services are on board to implement it. As per your opinion, in what time frame will theaterization be implemented in its final form? What are the major steps involved in restructuring of the formations of all the three services, and what is the present status?
Well, I won't be able to comment on the present status. Now that I've retired, I'm not privy to discussions which are confidential in nature. But once again, I would like to highlight this point that theaterization is also not an on off switch, that you will flip the switch and tomorrow you will be theaters. So, whatever is the final decision taken on how to go about it, what will be the composition of each theater, which will also differ depending on the threat you're facing, whether you're facing the Western Front or the Northern Front, or whether it is the maritime threat that has to be dealt with. So the compositions of each of the theatres will be different. And to transit from where we are today to whatever model is finally decided, will be also a gradual step. So as those steps keep getting implemented, again, as a work in progress, whatever shortfalls or infirmities are observed will be also addressed, and those mid-course corrections will be carried out, and we will progress in that direction. But theaterization has to be done. That is a bottom line. That is a given.
Right. I think recently there was an article that Mumbai will be the first tri-service station, probably.
Mumbai can be a tri-service station, but that is just one of those steps, as I was saying, is one of the steps towards the overall theatre.
Yes.
So when you say tri-service station, it means that the administrative aspects, like housing, supply of rations, water, electricity, all those kind of things can be harmonized and brought under one head, rather than the Army, Air Force, Navy each buying their supplies separately, or each contracting separately with the local authorities for their requirements of electricity, water, those kind of things. So that is just one step of the overall process.
Yes, right. The Indian Army is an organization with a tall and complex structure, with a multitude of ranks and levels of authority. 7 army commanders directly reported to you. From a leadership perspective, how difficult was it to lead a force of 13 lakh soldiers, and what are the challenges associated in commanding such a role? What qualities do you think you require to lead at that level?
Well, as you mentioned that you have 7 army commands and 7 army commanders reporting. So you have a chain of command. So it is not that one man is leading 13 lakh. There are various intermediary levels, and each level does their job. So the army commands have the corps under them, and so on. Corps have the divisions, have the brigades, and each level of command is exercising authority and a span of responsibility. So it is not that the army chief is directly leading platoon operations in Manipur. So whoever is the CU and brigade commander there, it says lookout. But yes, you're in this scheme of things, you're more like a manager. You have an eye out. You know what is you have, the need is to have your eyes and ears open to know what is happening on the ground, not only through reports which come through the chain of command, but through regular field visits. And as army chief, even during COVID times, I was out every week or every 10 days visiting units all over the country, so that I could see for myself what is the situation on the ground, meet the boys, talk to them over a cup of tea. Because of COVID, even that got little restricted. But yes, we could still meet them, listen to their briefings, witness firing, exercises. And that is how you get to know what is the pulse of the army. So that is, I think, very important, to be not office bound, to be out on the ground, to be with the men as much as possible. And that is how the men also get confidence in their commanders. When they see you up front with them in the forward areas, in the difficult areas, in high altitude, in snowbound areas, in the deserts. So they know that they're being looked after, and they're not being just forgotten or kept there. So that is a very important aspect.
So, along with the chain of command, as you said, regular field visits and gauging the situation on the ground is really important. While leading the Indian Army, do you recount any instances wherein you were faced with a serious dilemma in terms of a conflict between political directives received by you and your own professional views? If so, how did you tackle the situation?
This issue of politicization of the army is something which has been in the public eye in the last couple of years. But the way we are structured and the way we are tasked, actually, there is very less scope for political interference as such. Because, as I said, the chain of command, there is, I would say, no interference at the state level. Because the army doesn't come under the state government, it comes under the central government. So there is no interference at all at the state level. So I'm saying this because as a brigade commander or as a army commander, say I was army commander Eastern Command, it is not that a state a chief minister of a state will tell me that move a battalion away. He's got no say in it at all.
Yes.
So there is no political interference. Unlike with other, say, state police forces where they can move here and there, nobody can say that move a brigade commander, post him out. Not possible. So those things are so well institutionalized that actually speaking, there is very little political interference. And if at all it comes to that, there have to be very strong reasons for the government of the day at the central leadership to be wanting to sort of interfere in the day-to-day operations and running of the armed forces. And it's not just for the army, navy, air force. Nobody tells you what to do, when to do, how to do. Yes, we report to parliament, and parliament is the executive and the government of the day. So whatever the parliament says, we have to do. So that element of civilian leadership is there, but that is not the same as interference. Obviously, you can't have the armed forces doing something totally which is not as per the national interest. So to that extent, yes, we have to follow orders as well. But there is the instances of something being told which is not in the interest of the army to do, or as I said, that somebody has to be posted out or moved out or promoted for that matter. It doesn't happen that way. So,
Okay.
that meritocracy still prevails, and there will always be exceptions. I don't say that exceptions are not there, but there are very few and far between. So I would still say that our army is very much a political and a very professional army, and that is the strength of our country in that dime, DIME, that military. If there is a strength, it is the fact that we are apolitical.
So, continuing with this same line of thought, when the situation is tense and nearing a breaking point, and when it comes to taking a call whether to go to war or not with any of our neighbors, and I mean, obviously, after sufficient provocation from their end. So, at that time, what is going on in the minds of the government, CSS, and other decision making authorities?
Well, I would like to start off by saying that it is not armies that go to war; it is nations go to war. So obviously, if a nation has to decide to go to war or not go to war, the decision has to be at the national level, at the apex level of the decision making, which is the Cabinet Committee for Security (CCS), which has all the Prime Minister, the Home Minister, Finance Minister, the Defense Minister, the CDS, the secretaries of these departments. They all and various factors are discussed. So it is a national level body. It is not the army which will say that we have to do this or not do that. And in doing so, then, as I said, the entire uh, national interest has to be kept in mind, whether this short term benefit of war outweighs the damage that is going to take place, because if you go to war, there is going to impact the economy. Again, we come back to that part. So death, destruction, violence is going to impact the economy. So do you want your economy? So both aspects will have to be weighed together, that what is the threat, and is that threat that is there going to impact your economy more than the loss which will be there by going to war. So it is more a transactional decision uh, which has to be taken.
So you have to weigh the pros and
Pros
cons
and cons,
and
absolutely.
then
Yeah.
take a call. Are there any particular leadership situations you faced during the early phase of your career as a young officer, company commander, or as a commanding officer directly leading troops, which you would like to share with the audience?
Well, 42 years in the army, I think every day is a decision. So, uh, but I think more than anything else, most of us join the army for a sense of adventure. And I think I've had my share of that right from the time I was a young officer. And we have a system in the army of field postings and peace posting. And obviously, field postings are more difficult, more challenging. At times, you are there at your post with 5 men. That's all you have to, to talk to. And so each day is a challenge. It's not that there are no challenges in peace. Peacetime also has its own share of challenges. But what is important is that you have to learn and grow with each of those challenges that you face. And you may have setbacks also. And I think there have been occasions where I've filed away a piece of information from some of my earlier years, which somehow was there in my subconscious and came back to me when I had attained higher ranks, so that I didn't make those mistakes or that I encountered in my younger days and didn't pass it on and make those same mistakes when I became senior. What is also important is that span of command. As I said, as a young officer, you may be, as a platoon commander, 30 men under you, as a company commander, 100, as a battalion commander, 800. So the impact of your decision is affecting more and more people as you're going up. So all the more reason that whatever decision you take has to be more well thought of and not just an off the cuff decision, because it's going to affect so many people. And I would also like to add that those mistakes are condoned. Condoned in the sense they're not taken against you, because people know that if you're going to do work, you're going to do mistakes. You will not be right all the time. So you've gone on a patrol, sometimes you get lost. It is, you don't hit the point exactly, so that will happen. But that's part of the learning process. As long as you don't make the same mistake again and again, that's okay.
Global military expenditure grew by 7% in 2023, the steepest rise since 2009, according to a Swedish think tank report. India is the fourth highest spender on military. China's defense spending is 3 times of India. Is the government spending enough? As all this also depends on the GDP of the country. Diplomatically, we have ensured that we do not go to war. However, only having the kind of capabilities US, China, or Russia has can deter our enemies. What are your thoughts on this? Prior to that, is the government spending enough to build these capabilities, and how can the government help Indian private sector?
Well, I think I partly answered that question earlier when I
Yes.
said that if you want peace, prepare for war.
Right.
Now, when you have to prepare for war, the security of a country is the prime responsibility of government. That cannot be outsourced. When you can outsource everything else, but you can't outsource the defense of your country. So, when it comes to expenditure on defense, after you have budget and you have even business, you have EBITDA. So the first thing you do is interest. So the government also has to clear its debts first. But once that is done, then the next first charge, the first expenditure, which is the priority and the responsibility of government, is defense. There is no getting away from that. But how much to spend on defense will, of course, then again depend on a multitude of factors, including the threats which are there, the likelihood of those threats manifesting, and that has to be balanced against the other requirements of health, infrastructure, schools, colleges, hospital, and this debate of the guns versus butter, defense versus development. This is a age-old debate. How much to be spent on defense against more pressing requirements? And you would agree that India is still a poor country. We still have a long way to go to match up with the developed world. If you see the various human development indices, whether it is healthcare, whether it is deaths during childbirth, universal education, etc., etc., we are still, in the, I would say, halfway mark only. So we have a long way to go. And therefore, we have to be able to balance out how much to spend on defense and how much to spend on development. And that is a very difficult decision, and that is for the government of the day to decide.
Yes. It is a tricky balance.
It is a tricky balance. So,
How close were the Indian armed forces to escalate the post Pulwama security situation, which developed after the Pulwama attack?
I think after Pulwama, we did the Balakot strikes. So, it's not that we did not respond. So, the Balakot strikes were as a result of the terrorist strike at Pulwama, and that was a very well thought out operation. There are conflicting reports on how many casualties took place and etc., etc. But that is not important. What is important that it showed the country's resolve to retaliate and not take things lying down. That is the major takeaway from the Balakot strikes. Not only the Balakot strikes, earlier the surgical strikes which were carried out after the Uri attacks, the surgical strikes which were carried out on the India-Myanmar border after insurgent terrorist attacks on Indian army troops in Nagaland and Manipur. So all those showed a resolve to take retaliatory action if we are provoked. So that is the important part. But at the same time, the retaliatory action is justified, is proportionate to the you know, initial attack which has taken place. And that is acceptable in international law, by the way. So it is not that we violated any laws or anything like that. So it showed that we will not take things lying down. That is the major lesson learned. And because this retaliatory action is proportionate, it keeps the level down. Because the retaliatory action should not further lead into a spiral which escalates or finally reaches into a full blown out conflict or war. And I think if I were to draw a parallel, the Israeli reaction to the terrorist strikes by the Hamas have actually become a full-fledged war, which has drawn the entire region into conflict. So maybe a degree of proportionality, had it been exercised, rather than going in with that sense of retribution, then there also the tempers could have been kept a little lower. But main lesson, as I said, out of these 3 strikes that we carried out, that India is willing to take the battle to the enemy.
In the armed forces, training is coercive to enforce discipline when a cadet joins NDA, and physical leadership is at play at the initial level. As you move up the hierarchy, how other kinds of leadership are developed?
Well, I think that brings us to a very fundamental question about leadership and management. So, in the earlier stages, you're a leader, and that's why they say you lead from the front. And that is not to say that both aspects are not at play at any one time, but as you grow up and rise in the army hierarchy, the managerial aspects will become more important, and the leadership aspects are still there. As I said, when I'm going and visiting the troops on the front lines, that is the leadership aspect. But the whole process which sent them to that front line was the managerial part. Which unit to go, when to go, how to go, was all being managed by a complete team. So this is a transition process which takes place, and how well you can absorb these new challenges as you go up with in the ranks is very important. And those who are able to adapt to these changes will obviously do better, because the qualities which are required as a young officer to be able to, like we say, as a young officer, you should be able to outshoot and outrun your men. That you should be the first person who, in the physical training. And if they're running it in 10 minutes, you should be able to run it in 9 minutes. No, you should be better physically fit, and so on and so forth. That doesn't mean that as the chief has to be able to run faster than the youngest man in the army.
Right.
So obviously there is a transition between the qualities which are required, and I think that is a very important part which is sometimes lost sight of, because as a young officer, that is your sort of comfort zone, because you're physically fit. There are less demands of the managerial aspects, which, as I said, are sometimes more difficult than the leadership aspects, because those decisions don't really affect so many people. So this, if you can transit and be able to do both roles in the correct proportion, then it is much better.
How do you groom yourself to be effective as a leader, from direct tactical leadership to indirect strategic leadership? And what are your experiences in these areas?
Yeah, so we have 2 terms in the army, one is called battle drills and one is called battle procedures. So battle drills are your instinctive reactions to a situation, where you can't start thinking that these are the pros and these are the cons, this is the advantage, this is the advantage. If fire comes on you, you have to dive for the nearest rock and hide behind it. That time you can't start deciding, what is to be done. But again, as this tactical situation becomes more complex, then there will always be a little bit more reaction time. And that is where the battle procedures start kicking in. Again, it is a question of tactics at a very basic level. Then you have operational level. It's not straight away jumping to strategy. So there is a tactics, and then operational art, and then you go on to the realm of strategy. And I would say tactics is the battalion commander and below. The operational level is the brigade commander, div commander, divisional commander, and then you go on to the strategic level as a army commander and the chief. And so of course these levels are also slightly overlapping. It's not very clear cut demarcation. So again, how you are able to deal with each situation, keeping in mind whether it's peacetime, wartime, whether it is counterinsurgency, whether it is a border area, whether it is in your depth area, all those factors will come into play. And so it's sometimes it's intuitive. You just do the correct thing without knowing why you did it. But sometimes it is a result of going through an informal procedure in your mind before you arrive at that decision.
Right. So, on the backdrop of what we have been speaking about leadership, so what has been your best or most memorable leadership experience in your 42 years in the army, and also the most difficult leadership experience, or like sometimes there are moments of truth that a leader has to face.
When you join the army, you don't think you're going to become chief. That's
True.
very far away.
Yeah.
But whenever you join and whichever branch you join, I think the first ambition of any officer is to be able to become a battalion commander or regimental commander, that is in the rank of colonel. That is the basic unit, if I were to put it, because it is the battalions which constitute the brigades, and the brigades constitute the divisions. So that is the basic brick, you can say. So your ambition is to be able to command a battalion, and the best tenure I had was as a battalion commander when I commanded the 2 Rashtra Rifles battalion in a counterinsurgency environment in JNK.
Okay.
So I would say that was the best as well as the most challenging, because those were the post Kargil days when terrorism was at its peak in the JNK Valley. And I think because of the efforts of all the units which were deployed there, not just my unit, but because of the efforts of all the units which were deployed there, we were able to bring down the levels of violence and restore normalcy within a span of 2-3 years after the Kargil conflict had got over, which was 99 2000. So by 2000, between 2000 and 2003 was the time I commanded my battalion. So that was, I think, the best and at the same time the most challenging.
Okay.
Well, decision making again. People are under the impression that army is all yes sir, no sir. But when operational planning is done, actually inputs are taken from everyone. It is not just the commanding officer, or it's not just the general who says that do this. He has not reached that decision in isolation. And at the planning level, before a decision is taken, then everyone gives his inputs. And it is only after everyone's inputs have been carefully considered, then that best course of action which is there. Again, there would be option A, option B, option C, and then whoever is the boss man, whether a battalion commander or a brigade commander, has to choose, and that's what he's getting paid for, to take that decision. If it is good, he gets all the credit. If it is bad, then you face the flak. So, as a battalion commander, as I said, in counterinsurgency, we were launching operations almost every alternate day. They could have gone either way. It could have been a lot of casualties suffered or terrorists eliminated. I think I was lucky that most of my operations were successful, and perhaps that's why I reached where I reached.
Yes. What was the turning point, the crucible of leadership experience for you? Was there any turning point where you felt your destiny changed and propelled your rise to the top? How do you think one should handle failure to reverse it for success?
Well, the structure of the army and the way the promotions are made, and it's a very well established pattern. So there's no fast track. It is not where, like in a civil street or in industry, somebody has done very well, you can pick him up and make him CEO. So you can't pick up a major and say, okay, tomorrow onwards you're major general. That will not happen, no matter how good you are. You have to go through the paces along with your batch. So you have to keep doing sustained hard work. It's not that in one tenure or in 1 year you do very well and then next 2 years you switch off. So it's sustained hard work over a number of years, which actually, I will not say propel you to the top, but increase your chances of doing well. So that is what is important, and not just flash in the pans.
So, you mean to say that there is no one, there can't be one turning point. It's always a combination of sustained efforts.
So if I say that my battalion command was very good, it is not just because of that I went further up. My brigade command tenure also had to be good. My GOC, that is the divisional command tenure, also had to be good. So it's not just that I could rest on the laurels of some thing I did 1 decade ago and expect that will carry me through for years and years. No, people want to see what you're doing that year. So every year you have to be on the ball.
Yeah. What was your experience leading in high risk areas? And what was your experience as interim CDS? What was the difference in environmental and decision making factors of that position?
When you're, as I said, the battalion commander's tenure, that is the time when that's the last time you're actually in direct contact with and leading troops. And from the brigade commander, brigadier onwards, you become more a manager and less a leader. But whatever level you are at, especially when you are a commanding officer and below, the men must know that you are willing to share the risks and the deprivations that they face. And when they know you are there in the thick of it, then they are also willing to give 110%. It doesn't work that you are sitting in an air conditioned office and you tell them that go fight at the front. No, you have to be there with them. So that is the main difference, I would say, that between a corporate job and army job or an armed forces job, that the risks and the rewards both have to be equally shared. And if the men know that you are always there, if not shoulder to shoulder, just one step behind, then they will also do their best.
Do you have any interesting anecdotes to share from your early formative years, school life in Jnana Prabodhini, and your NDA days in Pune? Please share any distinct memory of developing friendships and family bonds during those years.
Well, my father was also in service, so we were also posted from place to place. The last 2 years of my schooling, though, 10th and 11th, I did from Jnana Prabodhini. And I think the friendships I made during those days are still very strong. The bonds are still strong. And whenever I come to Pune, we always catch up, whether even while I was in service. And those are the actually bonds which endure. I think your school and college friends. For us, the equivalent of college is, of course, NDA. So those are the bonds which you've made during your formative years. Those are the bonds which endure even now. So even now, after we have retired, my best friends are from my school days and from my NDA days. I think that is what we have to, and these bonds have to be nurtured. It is not that you were in school together and then you meet 40 years later. No, you have to to invest in that relationship. Only then those friendships remain. And we had many good times in school, and I remember particularly one trek we had done to Sivagad, and there, of course, just because 2, 3 of us had given the NDA exam, we were expected to be leading everybody. Although at that time we were just school children like anyone else, but already in the minds of our classmates, they had put us on a slightly higher pedestal just because we had given the NDA exam. So that is, how attitudes also and impressions change. That just because we are wanting to go to the army, they assumed we are physically fitter than them. So that is one thing that comes to mind.
Yes. The picture with your father on Twitter, it is really heartwarming. What was the influence and role of your parents in your growing up years and whenever you achieved higher positions?
Well, as I said, my father was also in the service. He was in the Air Force. But originally, he wanted to join the army. And in fact, he had joined the Indian Military Academy. Unfortunately, he had knee fracture while in training. And those days, that was automatic withdrawal. There was no scope of being retained in service, which is right in some ways. We do that even now. So I think, as far as my father was concerned, in his heart of hearts, he was always an army man. Though being in the Air Force, I would have liked to join the Air Force. But since I had specs, I could not join the Air Force. So Army was the default choice. With specs, you can't join Navy or Air Force. So you need 6x6 eyesight.
Okay.
So maybe I was lucky I joined the Army. Yeah. So, but not. But that is not to say that my father pushed me to join the army. It was still my choice. My mother was not too happy that her youngest was going to the army. She thought I was more suitable for academic and artistic pursuits. Artistic, definitely no. Academic, perhaps. But when she saw that my mind is made up and that I am going by my own will, then she also never stopped me. And they always supported me throughout my career whenever needed, especially when our children were small. They were always there to help out. And in fact, they used to take turns in coming. So that 2 months one parent is there, 2 months the second grandparent is there. So they were always a very big pillar of support to us.
So, I mean, you wanted to join the Air Force originally.
Yeah. But because specs that was out.
Yes, yes. The Indian Army would have missed out on a great leader like you.
That's a destiny.
What role has your wife, Veena ma'am, played in your journey towards fulfilling the duties and responsibilities as a general and in your overall personal life as well?
Well, I think the role of the ladies, the wives, both for the officers and jawans, is quite underplayed. They have a very difficult role to perform, more so because half the time we are not there. So, in fact, when my elder daughter was small, there was a lesson in school that, my family. And in that, the first question was, what does your mother do? So she wrote that, my mother cooks and cleans and bathes us and helps us with our homework and tells us stories and puts us to bed, and one long paragraph. And the second question was that, what does your father do? So she wrote, he goes to office and plays golf. So simple. So actually, the ladies have a lot of hard work to do. I think not that it's not so in CV Street. In CV Street also the ladies look after the home front, but at least they have the consolation of the men folk coming back in the evening. Here, half the time we are not there. So they have to, shoulder, they have to be the father also and the mother also. And to keep up a brave front, even when they know that, you're in a dangerous place. I think that is a very important fact, and we have to, I think, acknowledge the role that our wives play in looking after the home front, so that we are not worried when we are up there. Although if you're half the time, if your mind is on what is happening at home, then you may make mistakes on the front. So definitely, and that overall construct, of course, Veena has had a very important and stabilizing role to play in our, and it's a joint effort. It's not my effort or other. It's a joint effort, and the army is also like a family. The unit is like a family, so you have to take the family also along. So definitely, I would say it's 70% her work and 30% mine.
So, how do you think the kids of defense personnel are shaped differently right since childhood to go on to become super achievers, as we can see in different fields, be it acting or the defense forces? And what would you say to the young generation who want to join the armed forces? What are the distinct advantages of a defense career over other alias careers like medicine, management, corporate?
Well, I think because of the fact that we get posted from place to place at quite regular intervals, and every place that you go to, it is a new house, a new school, new friends. I think armed forces personnel, the kids are more adaptable, and because of not only more adaptable, but because of this, they have much more myriad experiences of different states, cultures, cuisines, languages, and that makes them, I think, more well-rounded personalities rather than somebody who's only grown up in one place all through their lives. And perhaps it is because of that that when they go out into the workforce, they're better able to appreciate the vagaries and different opinions, and perhaps that helps them chart their own course in whatever field that they have chosen. As far as joining the armed forces is concerned, and I'm asked this question many times, I will say don't join the army. It's I mean, it's a way of life, and you have to really like it. It's not like any other profession. If it is money you're after, then forget it. That is out. So you have to like a life of adventure, and that adventure comes with its risks. That adventure comes with lot of inconveniences. If you're out on a patrol, you're sleeping on the ground, mosquitoes are biting you, something is crawling over you. So it's not everybody's cup of tea. So if you're not cut out for that, then don't come and then be miserable for the next 20, 30 years. Of course, it's not that everyone is out in the field and out in the jungle all the time. There are different branches of the army. There are the technical branches also, where equally you can do as well in those technical branches within the army as without. But still, you will have to suffer those tough postings. As I said, finances, no government job will pay as much as in Savvy Street. You have to be prepared with the separations because of the field peace tenures. You will have to suffer with these postings every now and then, and so you have to join with your eyes open and knowing what all lies ahead, and not just with romantic stars in the eyes, and just because you saw a very good war movie, Top Gun, or something like that, and you get drawn. It's a tough life, so you have to be ready for that.
I mean, how do you see the role of women shaping up in terms of becoming future leaders in the defense forces?
So, the army has always been a little male dominated for obvious reasons in the past. But slowly and steadily, we have opened up uh, more and more branches of the armed forces to women officers. We also have women Jawans now in all three services. So, it is opening up. But in the name of gender equality, you can't have gender preferences. So if it is a tough job, then both will have to do the same tough job. And certain certain branches, because of the inherent nature of the job or the risks that are involved, have still been kept out of the purview. Though there is intense debate whether that is correct in today's world or not. That is, again, as I said, policies keep changing. Whether it is a good thing or a bad thing, we will have to decide, and it will come to be known only when as time elapses. But as for the performance of women officers in the army is concerned, I would say again that is good officers and bad officers. The gender has no role to play in it. You can have bad male officers also. You can have bad female officers also. You can have good male officers, good female officers. So gender is good. It's just your professional competence, and based on your professional competence, you will rise up the ranks of the army. I don't think there is any glass ceiling as such. Only thing is that because they have joined only recently, for them to reach those levels, so the first lot of women officers is just now reaching the rank of colonel, which takes 15 to 17 years. So people who joined 15 years ago are now reaching that first uh, level of selection rank. So obviously, out of them, some will become brigadiers and so on and so forth. And I was asked this question when I went to NDA, that when will we see the first NDA women cadet becoming chief? So I said it will take 44 years minimum.
Yes.
4 years of training and 40 years till I became chief. So 44 years. If that person is meritorious enough from from that batch of the male and female cadets, it will take that much time for the first ex-NDA women cadet. And that does not mean that the people who are already in service cannot reach that level, but that will depend on number of other factors. But as I said, there is a misconception that there is a gender bias. In fact, I could guide you to one YouTube video. There is one Lieutenant Colonel Anila Khatri. You can Google it and see. She, in fact, in an interview says there is reverse gender discrimination in the army. That women officers are given all the good jobs and the men are given all the dirty jobs. So she's gone as far as to say, and that is possibly the state. So there is no discrimination on any grounds in the army, whether race, religion, language, culture, or gender for that matter. All that matters is merit.
Okay. You are seen as a humble, straightforward, and professional person known for clear and concise communication. Despite your reserved demeanor, your distinguished military career spanning decades has earned you numerous awards and recognitions. What are your ideals, role models, and the moral values that you cherish the most?
You know, I will say that any person, not just me, you, everyone, is a combination of all the experiences that he has had in life. And those could be good experiences, those could be bad experiences. Similarly, you will meet a lot of people in life. There will be good people, sort of role models, not just one, and there will be not so good people. So it's not that all my bosses were excellent and that all my superiors went on to become generals. So, what is important is to be able to learn from each experience and to learn from each person that you have met and imbibe all those good qualities and those bad qualities or bad experiences, not to repeat that, but not to forget it either. If you forget, then you might make the same mistake. So it still has to be kept in the back of the mind. And I alluded to this earlier also, that keep it at the back of the mind that you don't make those mistakes. But it is should be a continuous learning process as you go through life. And it does not stop with retirement. I learn new things even now. So that is the thing. So learn, imbibe the good, discard the bad.
Right. So continuous learning is the key. Since sometime you are writing articles in the print about current affairs and current issues with the defense forces, how do you find this new field? Is it a good avenue for your creative expression?
Yes, it is a good avenue, no doubt. It also keeps me invested in what is going on in the field of international relations and military strategy. Because every week I touch upon a different topic. And of course, before you can write, you have to do fair amount of research. So if you have to write 1,000-word article, you have to research for 3-4 days and get your thoughts together. So it's a good outlet, but more than that, it is I think it's more important in the sense that it is keeping me engaged and active.
Right. Do you have any plans to serve the country further through politics?
No, we are always serving the country, even after retirement. It is you've retired from army, you have not retired from life. Yeah? So as long as an ex-serviceman, we will continue to do best for what is good for the country. And the writings which I am doing for print, again, is always with a India viewpoint and what more needs to be done, or is what we are doing correct or not correct. So, for example, on politicization of the army, when Air Chief Marshal Bhadoria joined the BJP, there was again this thing about politicization of army. So based on that, I wrote an article that a political army does not mean that you cannot have political views. A political army doesn't mean I don't vote. I'm still entitled to vote. That doesn't mean you can take away that fundamental right of mine. So my articles are of that type. And I think that by disseminating this kind of information, I'm in fact, in a way, continuing to serve the country by putting across very balanced views on aspects which seem, or aspects which are being made to seem divisive or controversial, like even this aspect of hot pursuit. The Honorable Raksha Mantri again in an interview mentioned कि घुस के मारेंगे,
Yes.
which again became controversial. So based on that, again I wrote this article on hot pursuit. That hot pursuit is accepted in international law. It does not mean you go and assassinate somebody in US. That is not hot pursuit. But if somebody comes and hits you, you're entitled to hit him back immediately. It has to be, those aspects which I mentioned earlier about, proportionate, immediate, and these 3, 4 things, it is allowed. So I wrote an article on that. So I'm disseminating the information and justifying India's position and stand on various issues. So I think in that manner, I'm still serving the larger community and interests of the country.
Yes, definitely. Uh, just last couple of questions. You, excuse me, you completed your PhD recently, I think last year, and you have also studied psychology of terrorism. So, what do you think? I mean, your findings, can they be used in which way?
So my thesis was, I was posted in Nagaland for 2 years. So I saw again during that tenure, I visited each and every district of Nagaland, saw the developmental aspects which are there. Nagaland has had, in fact, the longest running insurgency is of Nagaland, although they are now in ceasefire with the government. So, so the causes of that and various aspects. So that was the seed behind doing my doctoral research, which is harmonizing Naga customs, traditions, and institutions in the context of peace and development. So the bottom line is, that roti kapda makan. If you have that, then why will somebody become a terrorist? Or why will somebody become a criminal? But to have that, then you have to have the infrastructure and the rules, regulations in place. So some of the aspects about Naga customs and traditions are sometimes an impediment to development. And because that development is not taking place, therefore there are a lot of unemployed youth, and therefore the unemployed youth are lured by these anti-national elements, and then they join these terrorist organizations. So there is a dynamic, up and down relation. So if the development is to take place, then certain rules and regulations of, which are very tribal in nature will also have to change. And if those changes are not done, then development will not take place. If development doesn't take place, then insurgency will remain. So at the bottom line, wherever there is, strife, it is again from an economic, plane. And I mentioned economy earlier also, number of times. So if the economic base is strong, if everyone, those basic needs are met, then there will be no strife. It might sound, very utopian, but that is the fact.
Right. And I think you've been consulting the private sector post your retirement in some ways. So, what do you think? I mean, one or two lessons you would like to share based on your experiences for the corporate sector. I mean, what the corporate sector should imbibe from the defense forces.
This from the management point of view, or work
Ye-
culture point of view, or
yes, work culture and leadership management point of view.
See, I don't think there is much difference in the management part, whether it comes to the army or the. When I say army, means armed forces and
Yes.
CV Street. Those basic qualities are the same. If somebody is successful in civil industry, whether the Tatas, or if somebody is a CEO in Infosys or somewhere, those qualities are the same. That you have to be hands-on, you have to be able to take decisions. So that I think always remains the same. I think what is more important is that you should be able to deliver on your promises. I find that in many instances, you promise something and then you're not able to meet that target. And then that leads to a sense of disillusionment. So, as one of my seniors used to say, it's not my own quote, that you should under promise and over deliver rather than the other way around. So, say that I will give it to you in 50 months, 60 months, 5 years, then give it in 4.5. He'll be very happy with you. But if you say I give it in 4 years and give it in 4.5 years, he'll be unhappy. The time you have delivered it is still the same, 4.5 years. But in that case, you have promised too much and not been able to meet those expectations. So once you say that you're going to do something, you should be able to meet that target. And sometimes we falter in that.
So we can say don't overpromise and don't underdeliver. So the last question, we'll take it in the national language. जनरल साहब, आप देशवासियों को जिंदगी के बारे में क्या कहना चाहेंगे?
पहली बात तो यह है कि युवकों के लिए कि जो भी आप काम करते हैं वो पूरा दिल लगा के करना चाहिए, और उसका क्या नतीजा होगा, उसके क्या फ़ायदे होंगे, उसको मद्देनज़र ना रखते हुए जो आपको उसका रिवॉर्ड मिलना है, उसका फ़ायदा मिलना है, वो अगर आना है तो वो आएगा, लेकिन दिल लगा के काम करो और ऊपर वाला है देखने के लिए। हाँ, आखिर में हम सभी इसी में विश्वास करते हैं कि किस्मत, अगर किस्मत में लिखा है, भाग्य में लिखा है तो होगा, अगर नहीं लिखा तो नहीं होगा। तो उसका फिक्र ना करते हुए उसको अपना काम ठीक तरीके से करो। अब बात आती है कि कौन सा काम, तो उस काम में लगो, वो उस प्रोफेशन में, उस कामकाज में लगो जहाँ आपका दिल लगा हुआ है। इसलिए डॉक्टर मत बनो क्योंकि आपके पिताजी ने बोला कि डॉक्टर बनना है, इसलिए इंजीनियर मत बनो, इसलिए लॉयर मत बनो, और इसलिए फ़ौज में भी मत आओ क्योंकि पेरेंट्स ने बोला कि फ़ौज में जाओ। वहाँ जाओ जहाँ के आपकी दिलचस्पी है, और अगर आपकी वहाँ दिलचस्पी है तो अपने आप वो काम वहाँ पर ठीक करोगे। अगर दिलचस्पी नहीं है तो फिर वो कोई ना कोई बहाना आप ढूंढोगे कि ये काम क्यों ना किया जाए। और मेरे अनुभव में कई ऐसे किस्से हैं जहाँ की एक लड़का, उसने अपनी डॉक्टरी की है और डॉक्टरी करने के बाद अपने पिताजी को जाके उसने वो सर्टिफिकेट दिया है कि ये लो आपका डॉक्टरी का सर्टिफिकेट, अभी मैं चला अपना काम करने के लिए, कि मैंने आपकी बात मान ली, लेकिन ये मेरा फिर 5 साल क्यों उसने बर्बाद किए। ना सिर्फ 5 साल बर्बाद किए, लेकिन और किसी की सीट भी बेकार गई जो किसी और को मिल सकती थी, लेकिन आखिर में उसने वो किया जहाँ वो करना चाहता था। तो इसलिए मेरी यही 2 बातें हैं कि दिल लगा के काम करो और वो काम अपनाओ या वो फैसला लो जहाँ आपका दिल लगा हुआ है, और फिर ये दोनों चीज़ का जब तालमेल होगा तो अपने आप आपको बढ़ोतरी भी होगी और सुकून भी मिलेगा।